Hi everyone, I'm Archit Seshadri. Thanks for joining us this Monday. You're watching World is One News. Let's take a look at the top stories making headlines around the world. All right, we first start in India, where for National Sports Day, President Pranab Mukherjee gives out sports awards to 4 athletes. Next, the curfew is reimposed yet again in the Indian state of Jammu and Kashmir. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry makes his first visit to Bangladesh to talk about counterterrorism. Colombia's FARC leaders order a ceasefire and 52 years of conflict with the government. The UN is looking for its next successor to figure out who will replace outgoing Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. And rain, go away washes out the second T20 and demolishes India's chance of winning with the West Indies. Those stories in just a moment, but thanks for joining us. First, we're going to start in India, where the longest ever curfew in the state of Jammu and Kashmir was lifted for a short period after 51 days of unrest in the valley. But there was security soon reimposed after a shutdown call by separatists. Now, the curfew continues to be in place in the following places: Pulwama, Anantnag, Shopian, and Kulgam districts. All of these places now having a curfew reimposed. The earlier decision was to call it off after a high-level security meeting on Sunday. Now, in his monthly radio address, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi said there could not be any compromise on national security. He also warned that those young children who are being brought in for the violence will have to answer their actions someday.
और हम सभी का मत है, 125 करोड़ देशवासियों का मत है, गांव के प्रधान से लेकर के प्रधानमंत्री तक का मत है कि कश्मीर में अगर कोई भी जान जाती है, चाहे वह किसी नौजवान की हो या किसी सुरक्षा कर्मी की हो, ये नुकसान हमारा ही है, अपनों का ही है, अपने देश का ही है.
India's Prime Minister Modi also had talks with Myanmar's President U Tin Chaw in New Delhi today. Now, this is the latest in high-level engagement between both country leaders after Aung San Suu Kyi's key-led National League for Democracy took power about 5 months ago. The talks focused on a lot of different things, including trade and investment cooperation, as well as common challenges, including terrorism. The two leaders held a joint press conference as well later on in the afternoon and talked about the border struggles as well.
Our security interests are closely aligned, and we agreed on the need to remain sensitive to each other's strategic interests and concerns. To this end, President and I agreed to work together for the safety and security of our people and actively cooperate to combat the common challenges of terrorism and insurgent activity in our region.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry has reached Bangladesh for his first trip to the country. He's got a lot of things to talk about there. He's going to be meeting with Bangladesh's Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, as well as his counterpart Mahmoud Ali. The U.S. State Department says the talks will talk about several things, including democracy, development, security, and human rights. But the main agenda will be to talk about terrorism after last month's deadly siege at a cafe in Dhaka. The 9-hour visit will take place. Then Kerry will be on a plane to New Delhi, where he'll meet with Modi and attend several different meetings between U.S. and India's strategic dialogue. Moving on now, in a fresh development on the case about India's submarine case Scorpene, the Paris public prosecutor has now opened an investigation into the leak. This after French naval contractor DCNS filed a complaint about the leaked documents that had concerned about its 6 submarines that it was building for India. DCNS was left reeling after 22,000 pages of documents relating to the submarines that were being built were published in an Australian newspaper. The government in Australia has asked DCNS to take on new security measures in Australia. The company is building a fleet of submarines for about $38 billion US. This is for the Indian Defense Ministry. Now, they have come back and said the leaked documents have been examined. They don't pose any kind of security threats, but they are conducting an internal audit. They've also asked the French government to search and look into the matter with urgency. Well, today is National Sports Day, and to commemorate the day, India's President Pranab Mukherjee presented the country's most prestigious sports award to 4 athletes. The Rajiv Gandhi Khel Ratna Award was given to Olympic medalist P.V. Sindhu, as well as Sakshi Malik for their performance at the Rio Olympic Games. Gymnast Deepa Karmakar and shooter Jeetu Rai were also presented with the award. This is the nation's highest sporting award, and for the first time it was given to 4 athletes. Moving on now to UN, where the General Assembly President-elect Peter Thompson has reached New Delhi. Thompson is scheduled to call on Prime Minister Modi and Foreign Minister Sushma Swaraj today. Security Council reforms and anti-terrorism efforts will be high on the agenda for their discussions. Thompson will also visit the Red Fort Monument. He'll lay a wreath there at the iconic Freedom Fighter Memorial for Mahatma Gandhi. In July, India's push for a permanent seat suffered a setback when the General Assembly decided to postpone some of those discussions until its next session. India has pushed for complete reforms of the UNSC in the 17th session of the General Assembly that ends next month. The United Nations Security Council is all set to start looking for its new Secretary General. This is because Ban Ki-moon's terms is almost up. He'll step down this year after completing 2 5-year terms in office. Now, in the search, there are 5 women candidates that position has never been held by a woman. So if one of them is picked, it will make history. Let's take a look at the story.
The United Nations Security Council will hold secret ballots today to choose a candidate to recommend to the General Assembly for election later this year. The UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon of South Korea will step down at the end of 2016 after serving 2 5-year terms. The 15-member council will cast a ballot for each of the 10 candidates. The choices are encourage, discourage, or no opinion. Among the candidates who have applied for the post of UN chief are UNESCO Director General Irina Bokova of Bulgaria, former New Zealand Prime Minister Helen Clark, former UN Climate Chief Cristina Figueres of Costa Rica, former Portuguese Prime Minister Antonio Guterres, and former Slovenian President Danilo Turk. While former office holders represent a wide range of countries, there has never been a woman Secretary General. This time, however, there are 5 women candidates. The Secretary General is appointed by the General Assembly on the recommendation of the 15-member Security Council. Ultimately, the 5 nations that hold a veto on the Security Council are the United States, Britain, France, Russia, and China. These 5 have to agree on a candidate, and there is no requirement for them to pay attention to the popularity of candidates with the General Assembly. Bureau Report, WION.
Well, staying on the subject of the UN, they have reminded African countries that if they fail to meet their poverty reduction rates, this will happen unless they tackle the issue of gender inequality. Now, a UN report says that $95 billion is lost in potential economic costs every year in sub-Saharan Africa.
Gender equality are the silver bullets in development, because if you can ensure that the female half of the population is able to participate equally and make their full contribution, you are really going to accelerate development. And that's the message of the Human Development Report, that African development will speed up the faster gender equality is achieved.
UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon has praised China for facilitating sustainable development and climate change ahead of the G20 summit. On Sunday, Ban said that this year's summit has seen the participation of a record number of high developing countries. This result that China's effort is making could make the G20 much more inclusive. He also added that China's commitment to implementing the Paris Climate Change Agreement will help facilitate the UN's 2030 agenda for sustainability.
I'm very much grateful that Chinese leadership, President Xi, has already declared their strong commitment that China will ratify on the occasion of G20. That is very encouraging news. I hope many countries, particularly those G20 countries, will emulate, follow the suit of Chinese leadership.
Now to other news from Asia. Pakistan Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif inaugurated China-Pakistan the Economic Corridor Summit, an expo in Islamabad. Sharif and the Minister for Planning and Development visited different stalls that was set up at the expo. The event has been arranged with the goal to bring in domestic as well as foreign investors to talk about what is happening in Pakistan. You're taking a look at the map right there. Now, local and foreign companies are attending this meeting to hopefully bring more economic prosperity to the region. Moving now to Japan, the country has committed to investing $30 billion in Africa over the next 2 years. Prime Minister Shinzo Abe made the announcement at the Tokyo International Conference on African Development in Kenya. The investment is being seen as part of Japan's aim to assert its financial importance into the continent. Let's find out more.
Speaking at a summit in Nairobi, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe said Japan will invest $30 billion in Africa by 2018, including $10 billion in infrastructure development.
アフリカと共に手を携えて実践していきます。アフリカがこれまで以上に成長していくためには、何といっても民間の活力が不可欠です。日本は官民を挙げてアフリカ自身が主導する発展を支援していきます。
Abe met dozens of leaders from across Africa, prominent among them being Kenya's president, Uhuru Kenyatta, and South Africa's Jacob Zuma.
The synergistic spirit of this conference stands in such marked contrast to the sinister spirit of that one many, many years ago. And it is what gives me hope that all the outcomes we have agreed to at this meeting, together, through discussion, debate, negotiation, and dialogue, have every hope of not just being implemented, but of bringing about the kind of transformative change that we all long for on our continent.
It is the first time that the Tokyo International Conference is being held in Africa, with all 5 previous events hosted in Japan. Bureau Report, WION.
On Sunday, forces loyal to Libya's UN-backed unity government pushed into the last areas of Sirte held by the Islamic State. The battle for Sirte was launched more than 3 months ago by forces loyal to the Tripoli-based government of national accord. Sirte happens to be the hometown of Libya's slain dictator Muammar Gaddafi. ISIS captured the city back in June of last year, and that sparked fears that they would use it as a launch pad for attacks in Europe. The field hospital for the pro-GNA forces said that at least 34 loyalists were killed and 150 were injured in Sunday's offensive. We're going to take a quick, short break right now, with much more stories ahead of this side of the break, including the Queen of Pop, Beyonce, who stole the show at the MTV Music Awards. That, plus much more global headlines on WION.